reports for January 10th, 2023. Would City Clerk please call roll?
Mayor Steve Andrews.
Here.
Council President Mark Olstad.
Here.
Council Vice President Tim Rakoff.
Present.
Council Members Clarence Hatter.
Here.
Ben Hutchinsky.
Here.
Dale Hayes.
Here.
Brian Larson.
Here.
Aaron Peach.
Here.
Does term quorum. Number 1, request to file plans and specifications for 2022 assessment job number 2, utilities street reconstruction of 4th Street Northeast. Mr. Emery.
Thank you, Mr. President. So yes, we have finished plans for 2022 assessment job number 2, utility street reconstruction. Again, this is on 4th Street Northeast, just kind of west of American Crystal there. So we'll be just looking to file those plans and specs and I guess get authorization to advertise the project. And then we're looking at the bid date of 10 a.m. on February 14th. That's what we have for that one.
Anybody have any questions?
Has there been any feedback from any of the neighboring properties since we last brought them in?
I've heard nothing, no.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you, sir. Number 2, review of bid results for 2022 city project number 6, pedestrian improvements at Bygland Road.
Thank you again, Mr. President. So we received bids last Thursday for the pedestrian improvement project at Bygland Road in 13th. We did receive 2 bids with the low bid from Tyzac Concrete in the amount of $293,453.85. That bid did come in about 19% above our estimate. I did my original estimate back in October when we bid this the first time, and I just stuck with my same numbers. I didn't feel that I should artificially increase it just because of where the bids came in the first time. So I left my numbers the same. So we're still, 19% above the estimate. However, the good thing is, the low bid did come in about almost 84,000 lower than when we bid it in October. So again, I think it was worthwhile rebidding. So, and again with that, I think, we're all seeing that the numbers are higher right now. Construction numbers are higher. Again, you do have state aid allocation funds that we can use on this project. We currently have about $1 million in that account, and we'll be getting another $350,000 to $400,000 sometime in January. That'll be added to that account too. So we do have a pretty good balance. And I did look in kind of the 5-year capital plan that we keep. We had kind of budgeted about $300,000 for that project is what we were kind of budgeting. So again, I think we're, kind of where we're at with what we anticipated. So the only thing I am doing is I've never worked with Tyzac, so I have asked for some references, so I'm going to check them before next week's council meeting, make sure everything's good. And then I also got Alliant Engineering, because they were kind of a sub-consultant for us for the traffic control portion, which is a large share of this project. And so I got them kind of checking references on kind of the electrical components, the street light type stuff. So just want to make sure that everything is kosher there. So
Where are they out of?
what's that?
Where are they out of?
Tyzac is out of La Center, Minnesota. This Design Electric, I think they're out of St. Cloud. So, so I guess with that, unless we get bad references, I think we'll be, making the recommendation to award the project to Tyzac. So.
Do we have any questions for Emery? See none, sir?
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Move on to number 3, consider amendment to City Code Section 152.195 is C1 downtown commercial zoning district. Ellis.
Thank you, Council President. Council members, actually 3 and 4 kind of go together, and because we're not doing public hearings at this meeting, we're just discussion, we can kind of discuss the 2 at the same time. We do have the applicant who has applied or requested an amendment to our ordinance, as well as then if said ordinance is approved, then they would come back with a special use permit for that use. Mr. Fife had contacted me sometime in December. There was some confusion in an earlier conversation. He had mentioned the word art. We do allow for museums and public art in the downtown district. I was confused when in actuality he was discussing body art establishments, which are known as a tattoo parlor in our zoning ordinance. So upon review of what we have in our highway commercial, I visited with him and I said we could certainly look to amend our downtown commercial to allow for a body art establishment. We would follow the same procedure as we do for the highway commercial zoning district, where it would be a special use permit, which does allow us to add any additional conditions that we would think we may need. We could do hours of operation. The two that are consistent with that one that's an automatic, which you'll see in the Department of Health's requirement, is that they need to have a wash facility for every 3 workstations, and then they need to have a separate wash facility for their customers. So they're required to have 2, whether they have 1 workstation, or 3. And then, so they would have the 2. So visited with him. He has provided me all the documentation from the Department of Health, which is pretty extensive, the licensing requirement. The thing about body art establishments or tattoo parlors is that I think the idea of what they used to be, there was some sort of stigma with the clientele, et cetera, and they've become way more common in downtown areas in a number of urban settings, provided that they meet all the requirements set forth in their license. Their license is quite detailed. They do an initial inspection, they do spot inspections, they require licensing of not only if I'm mistaken, but I think both the business itself has to have a license, and then the individual body art personnel have to have their own license. So it's pretty extensive. I felt that it would be a nice addition for the Riverwalk Center, because it is a type of a personal service, something that, would they have in the downtown area in Grand Forks? I didn't see an issue with it. So does anybody have any questions?
Do you have any questions for myself still?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one question. If we amend this code, it's not going to open up for something else to come in that we maybe don't want, is it? I mean, you follow what I'm asking? I mean, is it, if we amend this code to bring this in, it's not going to allow somebody else to open up something that we have no control over anymore about?
Well, body art establishment is strictly tattoos. I mean,
Yep.
I do think they allow for some piercings. I'm not sure.
Things as well, yes.
Yes.
I won't have that in my studio. I don't have a separate clean room for it. It's a whole nother affair to tackle. The infection, like rate of it, it's just not worth the liability.
Yeah.
But this is only allowing for body art / tattoo parlor is what it would be written as in the ordinance.
Okay, that was my question. That
Yes.
I wasn't concerned about this particular one
No.
as I am another business of some type coming in under this if we amend this. That's what I was getting at, I
And
guess.
one of the things that we could ask, again, the Department of Health in Minnesota, they're very specific with their requirements, their licensing, those types of things. We could ask for them to provide us their annual license so that, or any inspections or complaints that are received, or given to the Department of Health, they would provide those to us so that we could do review, so that they meet those requirements. I mean, that's the nice thing about having a special use permit, is we can ask for those additional things like we have for other special use permits, just so that they're keeping us in the loop, so we know if there are any complaints, concerns, spot inspections, violations to their licensing, those types of things. So,
I assume it's the same as salon,
yeah,
like in terms of
yep,
inspections?
yep,
Yeah,
a beauty salon, yeah,
yeah. They get inspected like once a year.
yep.
And then for our salon, we have to post it conspicuously, like in a spot. You can't like throw it in the corner. So if there's any violations, the customers would see it.
Anybody else have any questions for Nancy?
So the next process would be Planning Commission tomorrow. We'll do a public hearing, and then it'll go to the City Council the following Tuesday with the recommendation from the Planning Commission. What we'll do is, I think an ordinance requires 2 readings. Is that correct, Ron? Yes. So once the ordinance has its 2 readings, then it's approved, then we'll do, if it's approved, and if they approve or you approve the special use permit, we'll just do it contingent on the change or the amending of the ordinance. So then that way he doesn't have to come back for approval after that. So that's where we're at.
All right. Anything else?
How soon will we be able to open then, like in February? Or depending on if everything goes through?
I would think so.
Okay.
Yep. I think we do the 2 readings, I think it's 14 days apart, so,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, we're good?
Yep.
All right. Thank
Thank
Thanks, you
you.
guys.
Move on to number 5, discussion on outdoor wood fuel devices. Mr. Boushee.
We sat down and visited about this. Jeff had provided me with the Minnesota local ordinances from the MPCA, and they had, upon review of it, they had done an excellent job of preparing a spreadsheet. You can click on the links to look at individual ordinances. They cover a number of different things, whether they're prohibited, not prohibited, stack heights, emission standards, et cetera. Whether there's a lot of them just pertain to a nuisance ordinance. So when trying to kind of compare or contrast, it seemed like with all of the ordinances, they were kind of all over the map. One thing consistent is if they did have an ordinance requiring the outdoor wood fuel, is that they could not burn anything other than clean fuel, and that the stack heights typically were 2 feet above the height of the structures within that residential location. However, some did not allow for outdoor wood fire fuel, wood fuel, whatever they call them. They didn't allow them in residential areas. They only allowed them in industrial. Some allowed them, but they prohibited new units. Some allowed for new units. So it was kind of all over the map. So it really is up to the council as to how they'd want to proceed. But this does give you a good idea of what we can look at, or what we would look at if we had an ordinance, or what a number of communities have gone towards, which is it doesn't seem worth it for them, and so they're just prohibiting the new units. I did contact Thief River Falls because I saw that they had one. Thief River Falls was unaware that they had an ordinance. They did not know how they would permit them. They've never permitted one, so and they seem awfully close to Central Boiler, so I thought, if they haven't been asked in Thief River Falls, it doesn't seem like it's a common request. I know Jeff also spoke with a few cities, and he can fill you in on that, so.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like Nancy said, it's all over the place. I did speak with Sauk Center, and like Nancy mentioned, they had to scramble to figure out where they were on that ordinance. They've had an ordinance allowing them since 2012, and they've only issued 2 permits since then. And their biggest thing that they see that they have issue with the 2 permits they have is not using them properly, burning garbage in them. So that was pretty much it for the responses I got.
I noticed some of the things on here that they say no new ones prohibited or allowed. And when you get into their ordinance, it says that if you have one and it's beyond repairable, you have to abandon it and you can't do any more. I mean, I didn't go into every one of them, but it's a couple that I saw. Because I was trying again tonight to go into a couple of them, the page can't be found, but was that across the board? Did you guys see that?
Yep.
Seems kind of a risk to put one in and have an issue with it 5 years down the road, and then can't put a new one in.
What I thought of that is, why are they prohibiting them, new ones? There must be more background to it.
What I think is going on there is they're bringing, I'm sorry. I think what's going on there is that there was already these solid fuel boiler systems in place. They then put an ordinance in place and said, okay, if you have one, that's fine, but we're not letting you put it in anymore. So they're, in essence, prohibiting any new systems to be put in place and when the old one goes out, they can't replace it.
So eventually, they wouldn't allow them at all.
Grandfathered them in.
Yeah.
The existing.
I've been around one of these for the last decade. It's real close to a structure, and I don't see any risk with it if it's used properly. That's
Key.
that's the
That's key.
That's the issue, though, is to make sure that they're using it properly. They work really well. Heat a whole Quonset with it, but yeah, that's the only issue that I would see, is that make sure whoever's using it is using it properly. So I don't know if you need to have it inspected every so often if we're going to allow it.
Mr. Murphy?
And to piggyback off of that, when I did put this out on the listserv, I did receive one response back from another city administrator that stated that in a city that he'd worked at before, they had one in there, and they did have quite an issue with it. And again, it was more like the operator part of it. He didn't have a very reliable supply of good wood, so he would be burning wet wood, green wood, garbage, and in one case even tires, really anything that would burn, because, he wanted to heat his house and he didn't have a good supply. So it became a real nuisance for them. But again, that was an operator as well.
And I think that's kind of some of the things that have been brought to my attention, is that it does require a lot of fuel, a lot of wood. And so to store it or to continually get that delivery or have it available, for a lot of people, it becomes an issue, particularly because if you're heating a Quonset or if you're out, then it's just a different type of scenario. And so you have the ability to store a lot of it in a Quonset, whereas if it's a residential area, storing it might be the issue. So now you're looking at how often will you receive a delivery, and if you don't get it, what would they burn, in the meantime until they get it. And so those are some of the things that other cities have brought to our attention, because it's not necessarily the issue of it. The ones that have them and that are using them, they may not necessarily be having the problem. They just don't know what they would do if it became a problem, because the nuisance issue. And there are some that just are, we put them in and we'll see how it goes. If we don't get our delivery, we're just going to start throwing whatever we've got in there until we get something. Or they don't care, so.
It's a lot of wood to store.
It is.
That would, I guess, if we're worried about like mice or rats or anything like that, that's, I think, a problem. Because it's the one that I've been around, it's a trailer of wood that is sitting in their yard all the time. But they live out in the country, so it's not a big deal.
Mayor?
Maybe this has been discussed. Could we require full, complete, 100% backup heating system, right? If you didn't have that, you would have to be desperate and burn just whatever. But if you had the requirement in place that this is really a supplemental heat, you can heat your place without this, I think that's a reasonable requirement. In the same way that we're all inclined to do all kinds of things that are not that smart if you don't have a plan B in place. It's better to just plan ahead for it. That's what I'd like to see. If we were going to go ahead with this, I know we're going to have problems if they don't have any other heat source.
And we discussed that, Ron and I discussed that at the beginning, because if it was a nuisance and we had to tell them that they couldn't be burning it, you can't leave a family without heat. The problem is that if you come down to, okay, now I have to have a furnace as well, would it be worth it for me to even have the wood fuel? So then it becomes is it even worth it for me to take out the permit if I already have to have a furnace? I mean, yeah, you're saving money, but over a course of a span of many years.
Could be a
So-
few baseboard heaters and they're not that expensive. They are expensive to run, all electric. But as a backup, they certainly could run for a period of time. I guess for me, I wouldn't go ahead with it if they don't have a backup heat source for my comfort level.
Anybody else have anything? Mr. Vedder?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I'm leaning, everything that we hear, it seems like it's just a headache waiting to happen, and I'm leaning to writing the ordinance to not allow solid fuel burners within the city limits.
Larson?
Yeah, I guess I've tried to socialize this concept with as many people as I could to get feedback from the community. It's been overwhelmingly negative, assuming that this would be a nuisance, the smell, the wood pile, just the general concept. So it's been like 90% against from just the small group of people I've talked to. So I would agree with Mr. Vedder. It just doesn't seem like the residents are in favor of it from the small group I've talked to.
I think I'm in compliance with the other two. Pretty much saying no to this because I'm reading all this stuff here, there are a lot of negative ones. So no would probably be my answer.
Discussion?
So then I don't need to bring it back. I think maybe what we could consider then is maybe amending our nuisance ordinance that states that outdoor wood fuel devices are prohibited, so that at least it's listed in our nuisance ordinance, which is typically where a majority of these are putting that in there. So we can, Lana and I will find a location or a way to describe that, and then we'll get it in to amend the ordinance with that then. Is that the feeling?
I want to just say thank you for everyone. I mean, it feels like we put in a good bit of staff time to flesh this out, but I also think you gave us the information we need to make a good choice. So thank you, everybody.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Number 6, discussion on recreation facility projects and potential local sales tax. Reid?
Thank you, Mr. President, council members. Just kind of summarize a little bit of what I included in the RCA, and then I'll give you a little description, the best I can, of where we stand today with the discussion on sales tax. At our last meeting, I did not have updated financial scenarios from Baker Tilly on the proposed either 0.75% or 1% sales tax revenues over the course of 20 or 25 years, so I included that in the packet. From Baker Tilly, a couple of things just to bear in mind as you look at those numbers. The front page, kind of the summary page, looks at 4 options, the 20 and 25 years being the difference between the 0.75 and the 1%. To Mayor Gander's comments at the last meeting, if we zeroed in on 20 years, just for conversation's sake, the 0.75%, the estimated project funds is kind of the number I most commonly like to look at. That tells us how much money we think we'd have available for construction. The rest of the funds that would be collected would be used to pay on interest on the loans. So those are pertinent numbers to pay attention to as we talk about what the project may look like with the dollars we have available. At 0.75%, the estimated project funds is $11,026,525. At a 1% sales tax increase over the course of 20 years, that number is $14,745,110. The request to ask Mr. Gordy through the EDA to put out a survey to the businesses in town, if you recall, last year when we were having this discussion, we offered the same sort of survey, excuse me, and that survey was administered through the chamber at that time. So the questions that I put together for Mr. Gordy in the survey request are the exact same questions the chamber asked last year, just with the the percentage of sales tax increase that we offered being adjusted to fit this year's conversation. Mr. Gordy sent that out through his listing, and we ended up receiving 13 total responses over the course of about 2.5 weeks was the time frame we gave members a chance to respond. Those results, their feedback is included in the council packet. I won't spend a lot of time covering those unless there's a question on them. And then lastly, I think probably the biggest time frame to focus on is in your RCA, I included a list of the high-level project estimates that we have based off of the work that we did last year with our building committee to put together the large master plan for all of the facilities, and applied that 9% inflation factor to those numbers from last year. When I go through those, kind of thinking about how to best show this to all of you and to present the needs of the facilities and how that could match up to the potential revenues from the sales tax, I did that really on a 2-page document. It's important, I think, before we start looking really close at the numbers, just again to emphasize that these are really high-level estimates. They're based off conceptual designs and general square footages of facilities. There haven't been any pre-design work done. There is no design to bid or to estimate off of. So again, as this project potentially and hopefully moves forward at whatever level it moves forward at, these numbers are going to change and they're going to adjust. Some of them may get smaller, some of them may get more, just depending upon how it fits once the project is designed. So there are certainly going to be a lot more decisions that we all will have an opportunity to make as it relates to this project and how those dollars are spent and what they look like from a design standpoint. But the intent of it for you today is hopefully to give you a general feeling of, for $11 million, what kind of project do we have the money to do? For $14 million, what kind of project do we have the money to do? And then the last thing being, from the discussion we had a year ago on a potentially $32 million project, what is left out? What's potentially left out if the funding doesn't reach that dollar amount? So that's displayed in 2 pages. The first page being if we collected on a 1% sales tax for 20 years, I listed those items out. And then the second page, I listed them kind of in the opposite order, so I didn't have to relist everything again. I put in the items that I would recommend removing from the project if we were just going to go with a 0.75% sales tax over the course of 20 years. A few things to highlight, or pieces of this to highlight, I think that are important, is that in the project list itself, when I look at these priorities, I put them together based off of the condition assessment report that we commissioned JLG to complete in the summer of 2019. That was really the review of the existing arenas, the Civic Center and the VFW arena, and identified any deficiencies in the facilities, either through age, lack of care, or just simply that they do not meet today's codes or standards from accessibility, fire, electrical, ash ratings, you name it. So with even $14 million in a project of this nature, we would not have the funding available to completely check off every single box that was identified in that condition assessment report. So no matter what, we're to a degree picking the higher priority items that we need to be able to get the buildings as close to today's standards as possible. And so for an example of that, some of the things that potentially would be left out that are not listed on your spreadsheets would be in the Civic Center an addressable fire alarm system. That's required by today's code. There's a fire alarm system in there that beeps and has lights, but it does not have voice. It's not voice activated. It's not connected back to the fire station, for example. Those are requirements of today's fire code. It's yet to be determined at this point in our project whether or not an item like that would be required to be brought all the way to today's standards. That would be a decision that The local authorities, the building officials would have to tell us potentially soon, potentially, in the next 6 months, that's an answer we could start to formulate with them. But at this point today, we don't have a specific answer because we don't know exactly what this project could look like. A few others would be LED lighting. The report suggested getting the entire building up to date in LED lighting in the case of both arenas. That's left out in this project as I have it listed, and numerous others. But I do believe that the list I put in front of you would cover the major needs within the facilities to let them continue to operate at the same standard or better than they do today. And so with that, I think the sales tax revenues that we're discussing is certainly a good place for us to start the discussion, a good place for us to start in our spending plan, and then have a real big discussion as a community about just how much further do we want these projects to go and how can we get there. So with that, I think open for any questions or more information you'd like to hear from me.
I guess, I don't know if Mayor wants to say anything or not. I'll say what my thoughts are. I know that last year we went down for the 1%. I think we should go back to the 1% and at the 14 million. And I know the mayor is wanting to stay at the 20 years. I think looking at what's getting taken out to go down to the 10 million, 10.5 million, air handling unit, I think that's one of the things we heard a lot of talk about, that new air handling units are really, they're something we really need in there to make sure that we're up to code and making sure that everything's ventilated correctly with exhaust. So I think that's hard for me to say, well, let's just throw that out and go down to 10.5. I know this process is we go down, we make sure everything's down to the state by the end of this month, goes through this through them, it gets approved through them, and then we'd have to look at having the election in November of '24 for the citizens to take a look at it and vote yes or no. So I think we have time to go through these things, but I think now to go down to St. Paul, I think we'd be wise to stay at the 1% and at the 20 years. So I don't know if you want to add anything.
I'll interject. Reid, thanks again for putting together this list of what would have to come out of the project if we dropped from 1 to a 3/4% sales tax. And what I needed to see for my comfort level was to see, is what's coming out of there fluff, or is it really essential stuff to run these programs, to run these facilities? And I don't see any fluff in there. I see really the things that we counted on as important upgrades and catch up in some ways, but really some upgrades when you talk about air handling and better air quality. I've said it before, but really ripe hockey gear used to be a badge of honor. Walking into a hockey locker room that was just stank used to be a badge of honor, but it's not anymore. We've come to realize that is an unhealthy environment for all people, to be that much airborne crud. And so we've woken up to that. We've said, these little airways, are important. And if you trigger some kind of asthmatic and different kind of inflammatory airway conditions at a young age, they can hang with you. And so I feel, looking at this list, Reid, and thanks again for putting it together, I would feel very good actually talking to anyone in our community and saying the 1% makes a lot of sense. I don't believe we need to drop to 3/4%. I can easily say these are items of great value to our kids and to our adults, better lighting, better everything going in there. So I guess I'd have no trouble at all bringing out to our people in the fall, heading into a general election where they would decide on this, that the 1% is the right thing to do at 20 years. I'm sure you looked at the analysis, everybody. If we go to 25 years, the cost goes to $7 million and you net another $2 million in project funds. So that to me starts going upside down. The interest is way more than the benefit that you get. And once again, I know we all know this, but to anyone listening who may not, what happens here is we borrow the money and then we repay it with sales tax revenue. So the term of this really is essentially the term of a note that you would take out, whether you're buying a home, whether you're buying a big motor grader, whatever it might be, and you want to match the term of the note as best you can to the term of the value of the asset that you're purchasing. And then also, the shorter the term, of course, the less you're going to pay in interest. And so I'm on board with 20 years, 1%. I think it's the right thing to do for our community.
Anybody else want to interject? Go ahead, sir. Ben?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a question. Are there any sales tax levies that are coming off in the next few years that we know of that we can communicate with the city?
We currently don't have any. We used to
Don't
have
have
the
any?
pool.
Okay.
That
The
came
pool was
off
the only one.
2 years ago.
And then are there any levies for schools right now?
The referendum that they had,
Okay.
not sales tax. Those.
Yeah, the referendum's on there, and Polk County has a 0.25% that I believe is for 30 years. So that's only
Okay.
on there, the sales tax,
that's
the
the
state
only-
and the county.
That's the only question I have is there any of the current sales tax that is going to drop off at some point? So, I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Benner?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just looking at the results of the survey. It's interesting to note that 53% of the businesses that responded are opposed in one way or shape or form to a sales tax. Strongly support a sales tax is at 23%. And then when they ask the question, are you in favor of a 3/4% or 1%? It's 22% favor a 1% sales tax, 77.8% favored a 3/4% sales tax. So even those businesses that are in favor of a sales tax, they're in favor of a 3/4 more so than the 1%. That's our business community. I guess I'm leaning towards the 3/4 also over 20 years.
Anybody else have any comments? I think what we need to do is next week bring it forth so we can get everything in order to make sure Reid has the time to send everything down there. Again, we'll be down there 25th, talking to the legislators about this, talking to the tax committee. So I think next week when we get to it, I think I personally would like to see us approve the 1% at 20 years. Go from there.
The majority of y'all prefer 3/4%. I'll get behind it. My preference would be toward the one, just looking at that list. But if the majority favor the 3/4, of course, that's what we do. And we get the best bang for the buck that we possibly can.
Anybody else have anything? Okay, just bring forth next week, sir. Number 7, review of legislative day topics. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Council President. Council members, this item is in conjunction with the previous item that we just discussed here with the local sales tax, because we will be meeting with legislators on Wednesday, January 25th for the Coalition of Greater Minnesota's Legislative Day. We tend to do this every year, and it's good to meet with them, and it's good to have a very well thought out and well planned agenda to discuss with them. Typically, I would advise 2 items to discuss with them, 3 at the most, just for the fact that generally the most time we will have with any one particular legislator is 15 minutes, so it's hard to get anything more than 3 at the most items to be discussed. So the items of the most immediate concern I'd put in there so far are the citywide sales tax for the public facilities, as was just discussed before. I know Reid will have to, we as a city, we'll have to have what our request is to the Capitol for inclusion in their bill by January 31st. So we'll have to have an item of what percentage we're going to be asking for prior to then. And it would be good to have that prior to meeting with the legislators so that we can pitch our idea as far as what we need. So I will echo with what the council president said when we discuss this, when this gets discussed next week. We really will need to set what that percentage will be so we can meet with them. The other item I had on there is one that we look at. It is a concern for the city every year, is the local government aid, particularly because of our still somewhat unique situation in how we calculate out in the formula. So that's what I have before you. These are items that we brought forward before, but also will take any input council might have on if maybe we want to replace local government aid or maybe add a third item if we can. So I'll take any comments the council may have.
You know, you said that we have 15 minutes. They try to divert you for 10 of those minutes just to ask you questions about your local city. They're very good at it.
You're the green wave, right?
Yeah. How's that team doing? And that's where they start. And it's like, doing great, but here's what I want to talk to you about. You know, I know we only have a couple minutes, so hopefully this year we'll have a lot better capabilities of talking to them instead of being in the hallway somewhere talking to some of them, meeting them. I hope the House and the Senate should be fine, get in. I don't know, I haven't heard or talked to anybody about the House being open, so is it open? Yep. That's good. Because last year we couldn't go into it.
Yep,
we had to meet
correct.
everybody at the Capitol in the hallway. So
Looks like both are open this year.
And we missed some people too, so. But, Mayor?
Just as, if there would be one or two other items, and maybe there'll be no more, I think it's okay to keep the conversation going about our bridges with our legislators, since we'll be looking for state funding when those bridges are going to happen, keep them on the radar. And then the other thing that is worth at least tucking in there is the possibility of bonding for part of our recreation improvements that we're talking about. And I know it all gets very complicated, but philosophically, some of these legislators are really against a local option sales tax. They'd way rather push hard to get bonding money for us without a sales tax. They just philosophically, they don't like it. They think it's a bad thing. And so, you know, if we can, as we talk about the citywide sales tax, we're going to push and go for it. But we might even say to those that we know would favor the bonding, we could say, unless you want to, you know, put some bonding money against this, you know, that would sure weigh into our decision about our sales tax. I don't think it's a bad thing to those, especially that we know philosophically like bonding better than sales tax. And then bridges, however that might fit in.
Mr. Larson?
Yeah, I would, if we're going to add another topic, I'd like support for childcare, private childcare, and continuing that initiative that is started but hasn't really made a big impact yet in East Grand Forks. I think that's something that we could discuss there. The discussion of the citywide sales tax, there's not a whole lot to discuss there unless I'm missing something. You know, we're going to put this forward. We want to be on this table with the other communities. We're going to be in there with a value that's right within the bandwidth of everyone else. And like the mayor, I think rightfully said, there's some lawmakers that aren't in favor of the concept either way. And so it's kind of a hands-off discussion. So I feel like that's a shorter conversation, just more of a heads up that this is coming. But local government aid, probably number one. And then childcare or potentially workforce housing. Some of those things that are currently on at least the governor's agenda, we want to make sure that northern Minnesota is represented there. Those are my thoughts.
Anybody else? Mr. Riedel?
That child care thing, Warren just came up with a big plan up there, and they're gonna add to their facilities.
With a referendum, right?
Yep.
Yep.
That's correct.
Anybody else have anything to add? Appreciate it. Move on, number 8, consider formation of ad hoc finance committee. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Council President, Council members. Again, this is an idea that was floated, I believe, first in October is when it was first talked about. It was briefly mentioned again since then. And what we're looking at for the ad hoc finance committee primarily would be for the 2024 levy and final budget. As you're all aware, the budgeting process was fairly difficult this particular year based on the realities that we have for what our costs were and what the appetite was for increasing our levy. So with that being said, it appears that 2024 will most likely even be more difficult. So we need to start the process earlier and we need to have it well thought out. So the proposal would be to have a temporary ad hoc finance committee that would work for preparing the 2024 levy and final budget. and that particular committee would meet every 2 weeks, beginning in February, and then finish their work by early June of 2023, so that we can get these items before the council, get them debated, and get some feedback on it. And in conjunction with that, the reason for getting it done early and ahead of schedule is because 2023 is a negotiation year for all 4 of our unions. So we're going to have to start the negotiating process, and we'll need to have that completed by fall if possible, so that we have a known staffing cost for putting into the budget. So the committee would be tasked with looking at the following areas: the city-owned facilities and any other real estate that could be sold, staff costs, capital improvements, machinery and equipment purchases, and building maintenance. So there is also a recommendation for the makeup of the committee, 2 council members, city administrator, finance director, the department heads as needed, and the accounting technician. The council president and mayor would be available to the committee as needed, but would not be members of the committee. So that is staff report. I'll take any questions the council may have and answer any concerns.
Mayor.
You know, some time ago, we went to a committee of the whole structure, and we do these big work groups. The idea was nobody wants to be in the dark. Everyone wants to be at the table when we're having various kinds of discussions, and it makes a lot of sense to not have a small nucleus of people in the know about parks or about the library or about this or about that. Makes a lot of sense to just have us all aware of everything that's going on, and that's exactly why we have these work sessions and committee of the whole meetings. This is a unique time that we're in financially, as in our whole world, in our city, and I think it's important to get ahead of the 24 budget cycle and be very intentional about our priorities in terms of what are we trying to accomplish as a city, and then what does that carry as far as cost in each individual area. It'll make it a lot easier for us to make decisions that really would be very difficult decisions if you're making them in the dark. If you don't have the backup front-end information that this committee can provide, those decisions would be very difficult. As it is, they're not going to be super easy, but they'll be made much easier by having the important information that we need. And so that's the whole idea here. It's a unique year. It's a unique time. We are going to have to find some savings. Let's just say what it is. We're going to have to find some savings. And we want to find that savings according to the priorities that our people want. Number one, the people that we serve, tapping into the wisdom of our department heads, our finance director, city administrator, everybody on our city staff that knows about the dollars that go in and out of our city. And again, to deliver the services that our people want at the best value that we can. So again, this is because it's such a unique time, this is not going to be a standing thing year after year after year to have an ad hoc finance committee. But again, the product of this group will be the information that we need to then start into our budget process at the normal time that we would, having some front-end work already completed. So that, I think, is what's behind this.
No, I agree with you, Mayor. I think one of the premises, as we went through last 2023 budget, we talked about different things of how we could do this, how we could do that. I think this is going to be a great project. I called it an exercise, so it's to look at our city as a whole, take it and bring it back to the committee as a whole, and have some good discussions early and prepare the city what we are able to do and what is coming. As Administrator said, we have our negotiations this year. And that's, something that we look forward to working with them on that. So we were lucky we've had it for 3 years. This is coming up, so we'll see what we do going forward. But I think going through this and having the discussions and having the committee set up and coming back in early June and having a discussion with us and having this information, and when we go to start doing negotiations, is going to be very helpful. I know there's going to be some unknowns that we're going to come up with, where it's, it might be the health stuff we don't have all the information on or whatever it may be, but I think we're going to have a good picture of where we're standing and what we are able to do for the 2024 timeframe. I think the two council members, it'd be nice to have a seasoned council member and also maybe somebody new on there. So I guess asking the council members if they want to be on it, I think, in my mind, I think I know who I would like to see on it, I'll be honest, I'd like to see Mr. Vetter and maybe Karen or Ben on it. And, Mr. Vetter's background and his interest of a lot of the budget process and his ideas, I think would be very helpful in the committee, and I think it's something that we need to do. And so I guess I'd like to hear some other buddies' feedback on it and discussion on it. So not all at once, please. Great, let's move on then. Mr. Larson.
It sounds like a great makeup for a committee, so, I support your recommendation of the people.
Well, good, I didn't recommend you, right?
And I wasn't on that list, so that works out great.
So, but I don't know if anybody else has any other comments.
Yes, I'd throw it in. President Olsted and I talked it over, and just want that committee to know if a meeting comes up, if you're approaching a meeting and you would prefer to have us there for one meeting here, one meeting there, just plug us in and then we'll check out again. We're happy to serve as called upon. So yeah, plug us in as needed, and then we trust that the work will go forward very well without us. And I guess that's what I would say. We're a resource, but don't have to be on there, kind of be ex officio or whatever that might be.
I never questioned it. It was
right.
Mr. Vetter.
Thank you. I guess the mayor's initial comments hit home with me. I've been a strong advocate of the council of a whole, or committee of a whole. I don't like subcommittees. So if we do go forward with this, I don't want to keep the council out of the loop until June. I think that, once a month, the council should be appraised that here's the direction that the committee's going.
That's a great idea.
If we're going in the wrong direction, by all means, then the council should be letting us know that you're going down the wrong road. You need to come back into this area. And that would be the only way that I would agree to.
No, I think it's a great idea. I mean, good point.
Sit on the committee.
No, good point. See none?
So I guess I was to say is, so would you like the council members who maybe weren't potentially named to get a hold of you or me?
Yeah,
If
if
either yes or absolutely not?
Yeah, be great.
Okay.
Let us know. Number 9, discuss changes to bridge consultant contract.
Thank you, Council President and council members. It appears that the joint meeting with the City of East Grand Forks and Grand Forks and having the consultant zoom in, it appears that it has done some good, and it was very helpful. The Grand Forks City, they do the committee of the whole. They met last night, and they unanimously recommended to the body, the council as a whole, to approve the contracting with that consultant for the bridge study, with a couple of changes that will require some action on our part as well. So what they've brought forward, or what they made the recommendation, is to remove the named potential crossing sites here for the intercity bridge, which were in the proposal were specifically 32nd and Elks, and to leave that open to just refer to as an intercity bridge. The discussion that happened at their meeting last night was centered more on the idea of the actual site should be driven more by the data, and then a little bit further down the line would be the politics part of it would come in, but it should be more driven by the data rather than having those more identified. So with that change, they did recommend approval for that. So I was in contact with Mr. Phelan and Grand Forks today. They are putting together what they're going to be putting forth to their council as far as the wording of the resolution. As of when I came down here, it still had not been completed. I know, Ron, if you've heard anything from them yet, because I know Ron we've been working with them as well.
No, I haven't heard anything at this point. I just got the emails earlier today regarding what you just indicated. The other thing I just wanted to point out, it wasn't just eliminating the 2 locations of the intercity bridge. They just wanted to have it say 2 river crossings, so they actually eliminated the Merrifield verbiage as well. So it would be just 2 river crossings and then let the data go forward with that. So with that in mind, the only other question was funding sources.
Excuse me, didn't you question also that SRF was fine with the word changing the verbiage?
Well, yes, I had indicated to Mr. Murphy if he would reach out to SRF to determine whether or not those changes would substantially modify or be adverse to the consulting agreement, and Mr. Murphy indicated that he was able to speak with somebody over there and that they didn't believe that would adversely affect
I didn't get that
the
specifically
contract.
from Mr. Holte. I did get that from his second in command, that he didn't think it would be of an issue. I'll confirm that. Just based on my conversation with them, I don't believe that will be an issue.
That's fine. Just wanted to make sure.
And the other item that would need to be adjusted on our part as well, they are recommending they're going forward with doing the cost split 4 ways between the 2 cities and the counties. I did reach out to Mr. Whiting today. I was not able to get a hold of him. I believe he might have been out of the office, because I know they were waiting to see whether or not this was approved between the cities before they really kind of spent any time on it. So I'll get some feedback from him as well. And I should be able to make contact in time for this to go into the RCA for the agenda.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Murphy? None, sir.
Okay.
With that,
I'm so sorry. It's probably a good chance to just once again
I
say
didn't call him, yeah.
to our friends across the river, thank you again. I think we're all going forward in good faith, and I think it's a really good process. It takes a little longer than any of us would like, a few more unexpected twists and turns, but I think if we all operate in good faith toward a good objective, we're going to get there. So thanks again to everybody, especially to our friends across the river. Thanks.
With that, entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Vetter.
Second.
Second by Larson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried, means adjourned.
Yeah, that was great news, huh? Super.